Well, hello, and thank you for joining me today on this Knowledge Tree webinar. My name is Peter Mullins. I'm in the marketing team of Knowledge Tree. And today we'll look at a classic challenge, which is why sales teams don't use the great content that marketing teams invest in and create. The company that I'm with, we're called Knowledge Tree, has focused on this challenge for many years, and our customers are some of the fastest growing inside sales and outside sales organizations, and really some of the most innovative marketing teams that are out there. So we've had the privilege of collecting an incredible amount of data and best practices on how to help sales teams use the materials that marketing is producing. So every day we're analyzing hundreds of thousands of sales interactions and how these salespeople are using marketing content in their selling motion. And those insights are going to inform some of the analysis that we'll look at today. Over the course of the session, there's likely going to be questions. Definitely, that'd be great. Best approach to submitting those would be to email me through marketing@knowledgetree.com or just simply tweet at knowledgetree. Okay, so let's get down to business. In the course of this session, what I'll do is I'll walk through four primary sections. First, I'll look at the reality that salespeople are facing right now in their day-to-day. Next, we'll walk through the need for salespeople to add value in their interactions with prospects. Third, I'll ask the question of what's wrong with the current state of affairs, and that's really why aren't salespeople using marketing content to drive value? And then lastly, I'll tell you some of the best practices that our customers are telling us about. All right, so I'm willing to bet that most of you have heard this particular statistic, and that's that the vast majority of the sales conversation is already complete by the time a prospect interacts with a salesperson. In fact, sometimes this stat is quoted even higher than this number. It's often used to minimize the importance of salespeople in the buyer journey. But what's funny is that when the analyst firm itself, and this is from Serious Decisions, has gone to great lengths to clarify this statistic, then you know that it requires some added context. So the stat is completely plausible when applied to consumerized products and solutions. When there's a low hurdle for a buyer to purchase a product, it can often be more of a hindrance for the buyer to interact with a salesperson versus simply putting down a credit card. But as Forrester points out, there's not simply one kind of B2B sale out there. Different products have different levels of complexity. It could be a complexity of the challenge that the prospect is addressing or complexity to purchase the product. And a salesperson plays a critical role in guiding the purchase through to close. The more complexity, the more likely the salesperson will be called on to guide the buyer. So why is that the case? Well, it's because the buying environment has radically changed. If you haven't had a chance to read The Challenger Customer from CEB, I definitely suggest you do. It's really a must-read book for marketers. It's just masquerading as a sales book. It looks at the difficulties of selling into risk-averse and complicated sales environments. And one of the big takeaways from the book for me is that each sale doesn't simply require the classic champion. It actually requires 6 people to say yes before the typical B2B sale can be approved. And to add more complexity to the equation, data from 4 quadrants shows that up to an average of 20 people need to give at least a review, if not a tacit okay, for a purchase to happen. And that means that salespeople are constantly needing to engage and build coalitions of support within a prospect. And that's just not easy. Marketers have to support the sales team as they seek to build these teams of internal champions. And that's not just through nurturing or air cover, but through direct support for building the business case by your sales team. So salespeople need to build coalitions internally. Check. But there's another critical reason why that misunderstood 60% of the journey stat is not the full story. And that's because we all have to admit that we're not the first and last thing that a prospect thinks of in their day. In fact, they likely have many priorities well ahead of your potential project. So before I continue, I want to be clear, none of this is to diminish the value of inbound leads. But for most companies, there isn't or isn't yet a steady stream of inbounds that they can focus solely on. And that's often due to a prioritization issue. That is, your prospects are working on other actions that currently matter more than what they could be potentially doing with you. Or there's an awareness and identification issue where the prospect doesn't know or can't quantify the urgency of the problem you solve. So this building of the status quo, it's often a very human-led action, one that salespeople themselves need to help drive. And that's why the demand waterfall or funnel that sales and marketing teams have become so comfortable with is different. Increasingly, we're recognizing that prospects don't simply enter into the funnel and smoothly qualify through a process or disqualify out until a percentage convert into customers. Instead, buyers follow a journey that's anything but linear. They may engage and retreat over time, and that's why marketing automation and related marketing deliverables have become so critical. By helping prospects to understand the challenge and build a case internally among their champions. And this need to support prospects throughout the buyer journey isn't limited to marketers. Salespeople see it too. They recognize that they have to add value to prospects as well. They need to engage and build consensus. They need to help prospects overcome the status quo issue. We recently ran a survey of hundreds of salespeople to better understand what their perspective was on marketing content, and they were overwhelmingly supportive of content as part of their sales motion. In fact, you can see here, nearly 100% said that marketing content was important or critical to their sales process, and about the same number said that they frequently use content as part of their sales motion. But there's a massive disconnect. Salespeople want to and do use content as part of their sales conversations, yet prospects are not happy. They need value add in order to support the construction of internal business cases, and they're using content to support the engagement of prospects. Yet, data from Forrester shows that prospects don't see the value from their salespeople. To me, it's absolutely staggering, and it's just getting worse, that just 1 out of 5 reps is adding value to a sales conversation. When prospects don't see value from their salespeople, they're not likely to have the information they need to convince those 20 influencers within their own companies, those 20 people that they need to win over, so they're just not going to be able to change the status quo. So what's going on here? Well, it seemed that courtesy of the content marketing revolution, that there was a ton of valuable content out there. But in one of the most surprising pieces of data that I know of regarding content marketing, it's this one, that nearly 3/4 of content never gets used by the sales organization. So when you've got marketing analysts pointing out that 16 to 20% of marketing budgets go to the creation of content, well, that means the average marketing team is dedicating over 12% of its budget, of its total marketing budget, to content that's not used by the sales team in the later stages of the buyer's journey, right when content ought to have the most revenue impact, the most impact on pushing deals over the line. So what's going on here? Why is there this persistent gap? As a marketer myself, I know what the result is, and you've got prospects that can't get internal coalitions together to build a business case, and you've got other symptoms cropping up. Salespeople calling marketing to ask for content that already exists, or creating their own content that may not match branding and messaging guidelines. And when you think about the heightened value of each prospect in the later sales stages, you can appreciate why it's critical that we address this gap. So what's going on here? If salespeople and prospects want the content, and marketing is producing content and making it available, but it's not getting used by those salespeople, then clearly something is going wrong. So what we found is that the reasons boil down to 2 primary causes. So let's take a look at the first one. Salespeople know that there's great content out there for them to use, and typically a company will place content in a few different repositories. It might be on their website, in a resources section, in a blog, in a YouTube channel. It might be in an internal portal or a wiki. And in each case, the sales team is largely expected to leave what they're doing and visit one of those sites to access the content. That involves searching for materials or browsing through folders to find what they want. They can search, but really, what are they searching for? It's not that they're looking for a case study or a white paper per se. They're looking for material